In the first video of this series, we looked at the adjustment of lifting the chest, and we had a number of considerations as to how we wanted to make that movement. Today, we're going to begin to look at how to build a system that we can use to improve our ability to get the result we want out of our adjustments. The ultimate goal with any adjustment is to get the parts of the body to be in a better spatial relationship with each other. The reason such a thing is necessary is because nearly everyone in modern civilization unintentionally makes habitual movements that alter the geometry of their body for the worse. For instance, if you habitually bring your ribcage down so that it's closer to your pelvis than it should be, you are shortening your torso, and besides making you shorter, that will have a number of negative effects on the functioning of your body. It will make your thoracolumbar fascia slack and limp, which will rob you of support and force many of your muscles to malfunction. In such a case, we would construct an appropriate adjustment that would change the spatial relationship between the ribcage and pelvis for the better. And what's better than shortening your torso is lengthening it. But as we saw in the first video of this series, that's not as easy as it sounds, and there are many potential pitfalls if we naively rush into an adjustment like lifting the ribcage up away from the pelvis. Most people mainly use their feeling sense to guide their movements, and will believe they have accomplished an adjustment they intended to make if they feel they have. But almost all people in modern civilization have skewed sensory appreciation. That is why many people feel more comfortable while standing if they twist their legs and lean on something than if they just stand upright over their legs. We get used to our familiar bad posture, and so if we rely on our feeling sense, it will guide us back to that habitual bad posture. We need to use our rational mind to get around our feeling sense. To help us organize our thinking and implement our rational conceptions, we can use language and speech. When we are making an adjustment to our body, we need to have a clear and intelligible understanding of what we want and how we will get what we want. That is to say, we need to know what we will do to adjust our body to get the correct relationships between the parts of the body. If you don't have a clear idea of what movements you want to make to improve the spatial relationship between, say, the pelvis and ribcage, you aren't going to be able to rationally guide yourself into successfully making that movement. To go beyond our immediate sensory experience, we need conceptions and plans of action, and those will be made with the help of language and implemented largely with speech and self-speech. One of the first things we need to do to begin this process is name the relevant parts of the body. Having relatively short names for parts of the body will make it easier not just to communicate ideas concerning those parts, but it will also make it easier for us to refer to those parts in our own mind. And when we begin to construct orders for ourselves concerning movements that will change the geometry of our body for the better, it will be very helpful to understand which specific parts of our body we intend to move. But the first question when it comes to naming parts of the body is what parts of the body are we going to name? Muscles? Fascia? No. We are going to name specific points on bones. If I say, put your left index finger on your left shoulder blade, you will move the bony structure of your finger to the bony structure of your shoulder blade. You will not know all the muscles that were involved in that action, and you will not know what specific muscles you're pointing to or pointing with. We cannot really consciously direct our muscular system, and since we cannot directly control our fascia with our will, we will not be consciously directing our fascia either. When we consciously direct our movements, we are consciously directing the movement of the bony structures of our body in space. To show how helpful it can be to have brief names for specific points, we can define a point that we will call the iliac. It's located on the top of the front of your ilium bone, at the front end of the iliac crest. If you feel at your hip for the hip bone, it should be the only bone really sticking out. We're looking for the point that is furthest forward before the iliac crest drops off. If you've located that spot, I can now refer to it as simply your iliac, and you will know precisely what point on the body I'm talking about, and we will not need such a lengthy explanation again. Additionally, once we have specific points, we can begin to consciously coordinate movements of those points in relation to each other. For instance, if you know you want to stop rotating your pelvis forward and down because you want to lengthen your IT band, as I described in one of my previous videos, it can be difficult to understand how you're going to orchestrate that movement. What part of your pelvis are you going to move to stop the habitual rotation that is shortening your IT band? The place to start is with an order to pull your iliac, which again is the point we defined on the front of your iliac crest, pull your iliac away from the side of your knee. So instead of trying to abstractly get the pelvis to stop rotating forward and down and judging your success based on your subjective feeling, you have a specific point which you can pull away from another point on your body, and you can judge the success by seeing if that specific point moved as you intended it to. Which specific points on bony structures should be named is not a trivial matter, and the points that I use come from the work of João Massoero, the creator of the initial Alexander technique. Massoero has chosen the specific points to be used based on years of experimentation and deducing what points are relevant to maintaining the torso in its full length and width, and preventing the various fascia of the body from being slackened and made limp. Let's define a few more points on the torso and look at how those could help us clarify how we will successfully accomplish the adjustment of lifting the chest. So far, I have defined the point called the iliac, which is on your iliac crest. The next point I will define is the top of your sternum. Your sternum is the bone in the middle of your chest at the top end of your rib cage. Your clavicles, or collarbones, attach to the top of your sternum. If you feel with your finger where the clavicles meet the sternum, there should be a little dip between them. The point we will call the top of the sternum is there at the front of the top of that bone which the clavicles are connecting to. The next point we will define is the bottom of the sternum. Of course, these names could be anything. We could call them A1 and A2, or any made-up phrase. What matters is simply that the point is clearly defined in your mind, and that all parties involved are using the same terms so as to be on the same page. If you touch the top of your sternum with your index finger and follow the sternum down, your finger will eventually hit the arch of your lower ribs. While there is technically a part of your sternum that goes below the arch, which is called the xiphoid process, the point we are looking for is just above the arch of your lower ribs. So if you have hit the arch or gone below it, move back up a little so that you're on the body of the sternum. We will call the lowest point on the front of the sternum the bottom of the sternum. The last points we will define today are the rib 8 points. If you now move to the arch of your lower ribs, you can trace down the arch with your finger. To begin, you should be tracing a path that curves down and out away from the sternum. But at a certain point, the ribs should change direction and start to go backward. We are looking for the point just before the ribs start to curve back. That is one end of your 8th rib, and that is why we call it rib 8. It can be helpful to lie down and pull your belly back to make it easier to really find that point. If we return to the adjustment we looked at in the first video of this series of lifting the chest, we can recall that we did not want the top of the sternum to go back. Well, now we know exactly what spot we're talking about when we say that. We also said we did not want the bottom of the sternum to go forward. If you've watched some of my other videos, you know that we do not want the sternum to be angled, and most people habitually move the top of their sternum back and the bottom of their sternum forward. We, of course, do not want to make that problem worse while lifting the chest, and would prefer to correct that problem in the act of lifting the chest. Your 2 rib 8 points are on your rib cage, so naturally, we would like your rib 8s to move up while lifting the chest, but we do not want them to go forward, as that will lead to a tipping back and down of the rib cage, just like moving the bottom of the sternum forward would. And lastly, we said we did not want the pelvis to move forward. Now we can say we do not want the iliac points to move forward. In the next installment of this series, we will get a more in-depth look at how to perform an adjustment. But the final thing I would like to make clear is that eventually the goal will be to get the points we defined today, the top of the sternum, the bottom of the sternum, both of your rib 8s, and both of your iliacs, to all be vertically in line with each other. To make that clear, I can put it this way. If you were to face a wall, you would want all those points to be the same distance from the wall. You would not, for instance, want your rib 8s to be closer to the wall while the top of your sternum was much further from the wall. Getting all those points to be on the same plane is not something that can be quickly and easily achieved. But if you understand that that is the goal, many of the directions I've given for lifting the chest will make complete sense, and you may find that if you attempt to lift the chest without considering the given directions, that your feeling sense will guide you to have certain points very far forward and others very far back, as opposed to all being close to being on the same plane. So let's return to our directions for lifting the chest. And now that we have a clearer conception of some of the specific points relevant to that adjustment, you may find it a little easier to make the adjustment of lifting the chest and actually get the result you want. But perhaps you'll find that actually you've only realized that before you were not really getting the result you wanted. And so we can see that as our conception of an adjustment becomes clearer, our ability to accurately judge our success in accomplishing that adjustment improves. By defining specific points, we can get a better idea of how we want those points and the bony structures those points are on to move in space, and we can make it much easier for ourselves to determine if we've succeeded in doing what we intended to do. If you'd like more immediate help with your posture, I recommend lessons in the initial Alexander technique. Lessons, which are done one-on-one over Zoom, will help you develop your ability to apply your rational mind to your movements so that you can consciously adjust your body according to increasingly accurate conceptions of the desirable relationships between the parts of your body. More information on how to get lessons in the initial Alexander technique will be in the description. Thanks for joining me again today. Questions and comments are always welcome in the comment section below.